The Florida State Seminoles coming off of a great start this past year, but a rather disappointing end to the season. It's make or break for Mike Norvell and the Seminoles. All likelihood, what could be the final season that he spends in Tallahassee. How does he spend it? Can Florida State get back to a bowl game, or will it spell the end of the Norvell era and the beginning of a new era in Tallahassee? Hello, everyone. I'm Lucas Hill here of the Southern Sports Scene. Make sure you all do us a favor. Hit the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Turn on the bell notifications so that you are notified every time we go live, posting a video or posting a short on the Southern Sports Scene. As always, we want to thank our friends and partners over at Frost Buddy. Going over to frostbuddy.com. Use the promo code SSS15 to get 15% off your first purchase on all things cups, tumblers, and mugs. We also want to thank our friends at Chike Nutrition. 20 grams of protein, 1 gram of fat, and 1 gram of sugar in every healthy, hearty cup of iced coffee. Get yours today. Click the link below for 10% off. And we also want to thank our friends at Buzzer for allowing us to stream live shows, videos, shorts, wherever it is. It's all going to be streamed on the Buzzer app. Download the app today to see if you can become a verified creator. TJ Pittinger of Double Fly Fries No Slaw with us today, talking all things Florida State football. TJ, good to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, buddy.
So last year, a little bit of a fast start. I think everybody really wasn't expecting it, especially with the rebuild that you guys are coming off of a 2-10 season. You beat a top 10 Alabama. Offense looks terrific after 3 games. The double overtime loss to Virginia kind of stalled the momentum. And then I think really the turning point of the season was that game against Miami where Malachi Tony goes off. You have issues on the defensive side of the ball. And then from there, you win 2 more games the rest of the year and you miss bowl eligibility. What was the biggest turning point that season that went from, okay, this could be an offense that could light up scoreboards, Tommy Castellanos looks amazing, to now all of a sudden we're now entering the era where Mike Norvell is on the hot seat?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of factors, but if you ask me for the biggest contributing factor, I think it was, I'm going to give you one, but then I'm going to give you like a 1B. I think Tommy Castellanos getting banged up against Kent State was the biggest limiter to this team. There were other things, right? Like I'll give you a couple here in a minute, but he just wasn't the same athlete once he got dinged up. I mean, you saw the plays that he was making against Bama and in some of those early games, and then he had some nice plays against Virginia, but he went from being like a 10 out of 10 running the ball to maybe like an 8, which is not bad. His mobility was still better than most college football quarterbacks, like better than 130 other quarterbacks. But his biggest weapon was his ability to just be shifty. And that dropped down to where he was just really good and not elite at it. And Florida State needed the threat of his run against Virginia. And so that was the biggest thing. I also think like more film just came out on what Gus Malzahn was doing. He obviously like goes into laser focus mode when it's Bama on the other sideline. But when more film got out and they're using trick plays against like Kent State and East Texas A&M to run the score up. And I'm just like, man, I don't know if I'd put all this stuff on film. So more of that got exposed. And though to me, those were the 2 biggest things. Like teams figured out how to defend FSU and Gus Malzahn and what he wanted to do. Tommy's mobility was limited, and amongst a myriad of issues, those are not the only 2, but those are the 2 biggest to me that it started that snowball rolling of just negativity on this offense being able to convert.
So it's almost like a complete gutting of the program now. A lot of guys are gone. You go out into the transfer portal, you get guys like Xavier Chaplin from Auburn. You get a quarterback like Ashton Daniels, who I was a fan of at times during the season. What have they looked like throughout spring practice? What are you looking forward to seeing from them in the fall?
I think so much of spring has just been trying to figure out what the heck they're doing, right? Like combining all those new pieces. I think there is talent on this team. I don't know that I love how it's distributed. I think they've got really good skill positions. I'm not quite sure on the offensive line. I think they've got really good DBs. I'm not quite sure on the defensive front, really the front seven with the D line and the linebackers. So there is talent. I just don't know how well it's distributed. And what did I just mention? Well, they've got a lot of good, skilled, talented guys, but I'm not confident in the trenches. And if you watch the playoff, if you watched Indiana, if you watched Miami, if you watched these teams that were great last year and teams that have been great for the last several years, Ohio State, Michigan, going back, Georgia, obviously before that, they're great up front. And so that is a concern for me. And so I think that, spring has been just a lot or was just a lot of like figuring everything out, winning a quarterback battle, trying to figure out rotations, trying to figure out which 5 offensive linemen you're going to roll with, what depth on the D line looks like. Fall will really be like, okay, what is the ceiling for this team? Where can we get to with the talent that we've amassed? But when you reset entire rosters like Florida State has done year after year after year, a lot of the early part of your spring and workouts and everything that's going on is literally just establishing who the heck you are, like trying to figure out how to play together. And so it's a disadvantage for Florida State when you look at teams like Miami, who, yes, they graduated some great players and they have to replace those guys. They still have that kind of core identity. They know who the running backs are. Their offensive linemen have come up through the system. They only took 1 transfer. Their defensive linemen, they took 1 transfer there in Damon Wilson that's going to make a big impact. But most of those guys are returning from from within the program. Linebackers, everybody came back. So I think that's kind of a disadvantage to playing this portal roulette game that they play every year. Sometimes it works really well. Sometimes it doesn't. And we'll see what the bag looks like this year.
Tim Harris Jr. was with Gus Malzahn dating back to UCF. What have you thought of him as the full-time OC now?
I think that I like Tim personally. Like, I think he's done a good job with the wide receivers. We've brought in good talent. Ron Dugans was in that position, that wide receiver role, coach forever, and he caught a national championship or caught a touchdown in a game that Florida State won the national championship in. So he was kind of a legend, but we really just weren't getting enough out of the wide receivers from both a recruiting perspective and a development perspective. I think that Tim has done a great job. I mean, Deuce Robinson came in with almost no production coming from USC, and he's all of a sudden a top 5'10" wide receiver in the country. He turned Mekhi Danzy from a track star running back into a legitimate wide receiver 2 at Florida State. They've done a good job recruiting there. They have a couple of freshmen that I think are going to be fantastic. I don't know how big of an impact they'll make this year, but guys that will be in the program for a while and do a really good job. So I like Tim a ton at wide receiver. I don't have any major expectation for him as a offensive coordinator. Not good, bad. Like, that's not me doubting him. Mike's going to call the plays. So I do have doubts about that just because the last time he did that, we saw they won 2 games. But he is the full-time OC with the caveat that Mike's calling the plays. And so Mike Norvell, I think, will spend a ton of time on offensive install throughout the week. I think he'll spend a ton of time with the offense. One of the benefits of what the player said last year was that he was able to spend more time with the offense and defense and special teams because Gus kind of took that over. I think you're going to obviously see some of that be limited more because he is going to have a bigger hand in the offense. So my expectations for Tim are pretty low because I still think this is going to be, a very much a joint effort of Mike Norvell kind of knowing, hey, like you said in the beginning, his job is on the line, his season's on the line, his future's on the line. If they're going to go down, he's going to go down swinging. And so I think Mike will have a very heavy influence on what they do offensively.
Do you think Tim takes over with the play calling at some point during the season, or is it just going to be all Norvell?
I'd be pretty surprised. I think these guys are making $10 million, $8 to $10 million a year. They're cocky. They have a reason to be, right? I mean, even bad college football coaches are still kind of an elite group, right? Of 150 guys that can do it, in all of America. I think when your job is on the line, it would surprise me because if things are going well, Mike's not going to give it up. And if things are going poorly, Mike will probably adjust and not put that on or try to adjust and not put that on a first-year head coach. If things are going super poorly and the whispers and the writings on the wall, at that point, I think it's just about riding it out. I doubt he would give up play calling in the middle of the season. I really don't know that I could foresee a scenario where he did that.
Trey Wisner comes in, a guy that was a former 1,000-yard back with Texas in 24, comes off of a kind of a down year this past year, but did have issues with offensive line. Um, when you look at him in this offensive line, I know you kind of mentioned it briefly that Florida State really is still trying to find their 1 and 2 when it comes to offensive line play. What do you think is going to be the look that they get from the run game this upcoming season?
They're going to want to run the ball heavily. Like Gus is very much, like Mike is very much like Gus in that they want to run the ball. I mean, I don't think you bring in Ashton Daniels to throw the ball 40 times a game, right? I think you're going to try and establish the quarterback run. You go out and get a premier running back out of the portal in Wisner. They love Usman Kroma, who was a 4 or 5 star flip, almost a 5-star, high 4-star. They flipped him from Georgia, not this last signing day, but the signing day before. And he was really good last year. So I like their skill positions. I like their running backs. I think they've got a deep room there. I think they've got a great 1-2 punch in Wisner and in Kroma in some combination. They also try and mix Danzy. And I talked about him being wide receiver too, but they do a lot with jet sweeps and lining him up in the backfield at times. And so they like their running game. They're going to very much try and establish that. Again, it'll come down to what the offensive line looks like. I think they will be a little bit better run blocking. So that'll fit into that. I have concerns about the defense. If you have concerns about your defense, running the ball and taking some of the air out of it to kind of grind that clock a little bit is probably a good strategy, to play a little lower scoring, non-crazy explosive type games. You don't have Jameis Winston back there throwing the ball. You got Ashton Daniels, right? And he might end up being really good, but I don't think you're, again, putting 30, 35 passes a game on his arm. I think you're trying to run the ball. You're trying to establish that. And I like their running backs a lot. Now, a running back's only as good as their offensive line is and how predictable an offense is. And so because they probably don't have the threat of, a quarterback that's just going to light things up, I think you try and, factor in quarterback run as another option to kind of like slow defenses down. But I think this will be a running football team. It wouldn't surprise me if it's 60-40 running the ball, even though that's kind of the opposite of what college football is today.
Looking at the defensive side of the ball, this was still a top 50 defense this past year, despite the results of this past season. One of the things that I think wasn't a really good thing, kind of the bottom half in college football in relation to forced turnovers a game. I think that definitely plays a big role into that one. Well, where do you see this defense? Where do you see what steps do you see this defense potentially taking in year 2 of Tony White?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing it is year 2. I think that you lost some defensive pieces that are going to be tough to replace. You put some guys, or you put Darrell Jackson into the league. You only had one guy go to the NFL in the draft this year, which was a little disappointing, but you lost a really good player in Jackson. So you've got to figure out a way to reestablish some of that D-line depth. And even with Jackson there, who was an NFL draft pick, you really didn't do a great job of stopping the run last year. So that has to be better. They are excited about the Desir twins on the edges. They think those kids can really play, and they showed last year that they are really good. So I think you're going to lean on them a lot. You're going to hope that some of your transfers pan out. They've got some guys that have been in the system for quite a while, and you're hoping you kind of get the best level that's possible from each of those guys, right? I don't think they have anybody that's a bona fide superstar, but if you can get, above average play from all of them, that's a big deal. I think the defense will be good in the secondary. I think it has a chance to be average to good on defensive line. Linebacker worries me a little bit. I don't think that's a position group that Florida State's done an especially good job with, but you need for that to not be a liability. I think that would be very helpful if they can just be kind of average for you. That'd be a step in the right direction for Florida State at that position. Haven't gotten good linebacker play outside of the 2 years with Bethune and Deloach in 23 and 24. I think you would hope that in year 2 of a coordinator, like, look, Tom Allen's a great defensive coordinator, and he went to Clemson, and they weren't very good defensively. And you would kind of think that second year in a system, second year establishing what you're trying to do, you will have some success in just that alone. But I don't know that the talent on this defense is, not that I don't know. It's not as good as a Florida State defense should be, right? And so that's kind of what you're fighting up against. Now, the question then becomes, well, is it as good as the ACC talent you're playing week in and week out? And in some cases, yes. In some cases, no, right? And so that's kind of what it's going to come down to. They could not stop the run last year. They could not generate much of a pass rush unless they were playing, like the Virginia Techs who fired their coach, or the Wake Forests who just obviously you overwhelm them with talent. They against Clemson, NC State, Miami, obviously, Virginia, they could not stop the run or generate a pass rush. And so can that change this year? I don't know. I don't have a ton of confidence that it will, but if you're a fan, you're kind of hoping for the best.
Who's your X factor on the defensive side of the ball this year?
I think that if you can get, your best players are the Desir twins, I think, and Jabril Rawls, who's going to ACC kickoff next week. I think you kind of know what you're getting out of them. So I think it's any number of players on the defensive line who steps up to really eat up like double teams, whether that's Sampson, whether that's somebody else that's kind of unexpected coming from nowhere. I do think that there's a chance that you could kind of see a star emerge. Again, if you could just, an X factor for me is linebacker play. If you could just get the linebackers to play replacement level football, like very average football, just fill holes properly and diagnose plays correctly, that would be a huge deal. I really like Ashland Barker in the secondary. I think they've brought in some transfers in the secondary. There's just so many unknowns with this team. But again, linebacker play is probably where I would lean. I said Sampson. I meant Daniel Lyons. I think Sampson's gone. But I think if you could get good play out of Daniel Lyons, he's kind of going to step into that Darrell Jackson role. I don't know that he could play there, but if he does get anywhere close to that, then I think you'd be in a lot better shape on the defensive line.
Would you say about the same about the offensive line for this upcoming season as an X factor?
Yeah, I think that the offensive line, you do have a lot of confidence in Herb Hand, right? And so it's a big question mark. It's a big unknown. I certainly have more confidence in the offensive line than I do the defensive line. They brought in some good pieces. They have some good transfers there. They've got a couple of guys this year that they've kind of molded up through the system. I think it'll be somewhere around average, right? And if you can have a top 50 offensive line, I know that's not great. That could be kind of like the bottom of the Power Four. I think you'd be okay with it. You'd really like to get up close to that top 40, top 30 range so that you're, kind of the top of tier 2, right? Like your SEC and Big Ten teams are above that, but then maybe you're better than most of the ACC teams that you play, with the exception of Miami, who will again have a great offensive line. Yeah, I have a little more confidence, in Herb Hand, just because he's done a good job of developing offensive lines at UCF and FSU in his 1 year there. So I feel a little bit better about that position group than the defensive line. But again, it's just a question mark. We could come out and see them in week 0 and week 1 against SMU, and they just kind of pick up right where they left off last year. What's tough is it's 5 new starters. So can you get 5 guys to gel together and do what they need to do against pretty good competition in SMU starting out with week 1? That I think questions will be answered really quickly on that position group.
Would you say that that's the most important game so far this season that'll define Florida State? Is that SMU game?
Probably. I think there are other ones that, you lose to SMU, but you go on the road and beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa, then they kind of cancel each other out. Mm-hmm. But right now you're a 3-score dog to Bama yet again, right? And so if you kind of say, well, you're probably going to lose that Bama game, you're probably going to lose the Miami game. Florida wasn't good last year and they beat your brains in. You're probably going to lose that game too. You've got a couple of tough road Friday night games against Pittsburgh and Louisville. You play Virginia, who was in the ACC championship. You got a lot of tough stuff on the schedule. I think they play 6 of the top 7 teams as far as the Vegas odds go to win the conference. So it's not even what you would maybe consider an easy ACC schedule. And so when you look at that and you think about, man, if you lose that SMU game, you have 2 weeks off and then you go on the road to play Alabama, which they haven't won a road game in 2 full seasons. Mm-hmm. If you start out with a loss to SMU on Labor Day with the nation watching and you're 1-1 because you play that week 0 game and you have 2 weeks to just let all that negativity fester around the fan base, around the program, and then you go on the road and Bama does what kind of everybody expected last year and what everybody expects this year, they beat your brains in, man, that'd make it really tough to be 1-2 through the first 3 weeks of the season. I think I don't think it's you fire him if he loses that game or anything like that. But I think when you look at the rest of the schedule, if you don't find a way to win that SMU game, you're going to be in a lot of trouble this year.
Do you think Norvell lasts the entire season?
Probably not. I think this will be his last year. I just don't have enough confidence in this team to think that they can get to 7, 8 wins. I think 6 might save his job. Like obviously the administration showed last year that losing to Stanford on the road is a 3-score favorite, and not making a bowl for the 4th time in his 6 seasons was not enough to fire him. So I think if they make a bowl, he's probably safe, but I would lean on the under there. I would say I think it's more likely that they win 5 games than it is they win 6. Now I think they'll be somewhere in that range, and I don't think 7's out of the question. If you pull an upset like SMU early, I think that could get things rolling your way, but I don't think he does. Now he may coach out the rest of the year. They may just say, finish out the year and then we'll make a decision after the Florida game. But I don't. If I had to guess right now, I would say he probably doesn't make it to next year.
A lot to think about over the next couple months, especially with the job security of Mike Norvell, arguably the hottest seat right now in college football. TJ Pittinger joining us to talk all things Florida State. TJ, where can we find some of your work that you do, not just with Florida State, but also with college football in general?
Yeah, you can go to Double Fries No Slaw here on YouTube, or if you want to check out College Football Addiction or any of the conferences, also have like an affiliate channel. So ACC Football Addiction, SEC Football Addiction, all that stuff. So if you have a favorite team, we probably cover them on one of those conference channels, or just the national channel is College Football Addiction.
TJ, we appreciate your time, man. Thank you all for tuning in to the Southern Sports Scene. We appreciate all of you that tune into our videos every single week. Like, share, subscribe down below. Turn on the bell notifications so that you are notified every time we go live, posting a video or posting a short. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, y'all have a great week. We'll see you then.